Hello and very warm welcome to Dr. Ahmed YouTube channel. Today in this short video we shall be talking about Emily Dickinson's poem. The title of the poem is I Felt Funeral in My Brain. I felt funeral, in my brain. Emily Dickinson, as we know that she is an American poet, very successful, very greatest poet and considered to be one of the original poets of her time. She was a person who challenged a number of things. For example, she challenged the definitions of the things and tried to give new definitions to the things. And she's also famous for writing in elliptical language. I mean, she wanted to say those things which were said somehow but were not realized, and that is what the change she tried to make. And in the same way, she also tried to give some type of newness in her poetry. For example, some of her qualities are quite famous with respect to her life. Let's see how she has lived in America. In Massachusetts, Amherst, she was born. She was born on December 10, 1830, and she was getting education in Amherst Academy, first in school, then in academy. And in that situation, in that place also, at the age of 15, she became a poet, but with the passage of time, she started to feel a disgust and dislike for the housework, and she didn't want to receive the guests as well. She wanted to escape from the domestic duties, and the same word escape proved good for her, and she thought of escaping through poetry, through literature, and she always thought that how fascinating it is to escape from the world, how good it is to escape from your life, from the people, and that is why the word escape all the time was very good for her. And in that way, the way she lived has given a particular tinge to her poetry as well, and as a result, she's known with respect to all these things. Whatever the case may be, she has lived a very fruitful, very rebellious type of life, and while doing so, she died in 1886, but left a big legacy of her poems. Hundreds of her poems are available, and people are very much interested in reading that because they all the time present to us something unique, something very marvelous. Today's poem, I Felt a Funeral in My Brain, is also the same type. Because here also a uniqueness of the poem is that this is the subject which possibly nobody attempted in such a way as she has done. She's going to talk about the funeral, I mean the life after death. She's not going to create the fears which normally the clergy creates in letting us know that this is going to happen and how you will be punished. Instead of that, she is talking about the moment when she transfers herself, when she is transferred from this world to the next one, the stage which involves in funeral and burial, that she wants to talk about. And during this, she wants to remain permanently present. People would talk in third person, or here we see that in the poem, the narrator is herself the first person. So that is why the poem is really very interesting. Let us go into that and try to find what the poem is about. The first stanza of the poem reads like this. I felt a funeral in my brain, and mourners to and fro kept treading till it seemed that sense was breaking through. So the stanza goes to talk about the very first initiation of the poem, that probably the narrator had died, and after the death of the narrator, the funeral was to take place, and in her brain she was feeling that the mourners are present all around, as usually it happens, that the mourners are here and there, and they are walking, they are doing something, and she was first of all unable to understand, but later on she understood that something is happening. So the first stanza presents to us the condition in which somebody has died, and during the death the mind is still awake and it is trying to make sense of the things, what is happening. It is able to feel the presence and the walking of the people, the mourners here and there, but was unable to understand first of all what is going on. But in her mind she was understanding something, and she says that something was coming into her mind clear. Let's talk about the second stanza. She says that, and when they all were seated, a service like a drum kept beating till I thought my mind was going numb. So here the second step of the funeral ceremony is being taken place, that in the second stanza, the poetess tells us that the funeral service began in the church, and she felt drum-like situation. The drum was beating and beating and beating, and ultimately she became numb with the thought of this beating of the drum. That means the service which was going on, it was not creating any type of happiness in her mind, but the mind was blowing because of the beating of the drum or the music which was going on. And in this way, the second stanza talks about the service which was held while the people were seated in different places and the service was being held. Let's talk about the third stanza. The third stanza, it says, and then I heard them lift a box and creak across my soul with those same boots of lead again, then space began to toll. The third stage begins that the funeral or the box is carried, the coffin is carried by the people. They tread and walk with the kind of noise their shoes are creating, and ultimately the creaking sound of that box is heard by the mind of the narrator, and ultimately it is lowered down into the earth. And the feeling of having a new space and having the new sounds that is being created in the mind of the world. So the lowering down of the funeral box, that goes to show the disconnection between this life and the next one, and that is why the feeling was there, how it was being lowered down. So that's the third stage. The fourth stanza would definitely talk about the next stage. It says, and all the heavens were a bell, and being but not far, and I a silent some strange race wrecked solitary here. The poet says that she felt as if all the heaven has become a bell, because the bells were ringing and she was the only person who was silent. Otherwise, everywhere the noise was present. She was the one, she was silent, and she was feeling herself a solitary person, a wrecked person, a strange race she was able to witness, and this is what her mind is witnessing. So from the real world of physicality, she was entering into a world which was different from this one, and she felt in her mind that she has entered into a world where she is alone, but is able to listen to the voices, the big voices which were coming towards her. The last stanza says, and then a plank unreason broke, and I dropped down and hit a word at every plunge, a finished known then. It's a symbolic one that the plank of that coffin broke, and ultimately the body fell there. And when it fell there, it continued to fall down. Ultimately, a big plunge took place, and everything was finished. And at that time, she realized that the life has finished. So that is the final stage of the transportation of one part of life into the other part of life that Emily Dickinson is feeling. So that's the poem. So we can say and summarize the poem by saying that it is the death scene, it is the funeral scene, it is the passing from one place to the other, from one word to the other of the narrator herself. Emily Dickinson uses the word I for herself and the mind in which she's feeling all this situation and is feeling practically dead. For the four stages have been talked about. First of all, she is feeling the mourners weeping and crying and walking later on. Secondly, she feels the kind of service which is held in the church, and then her coffin is raised, then it is lowered, and ultimately her mind and her soul passes away into the world, which possibly she didn't know that, and this is what she wants to say. So this is quite unique topic and quite different topic about which she has talked in a very unique way. She herself becomes the narrator and the witness of the scene which is taking place. This is something unique, that if somebody is dead, how one can find that, how one can see that, but Emily has done it, and she's able to make us realize that her mind was witnessing all these things. That makes the uniqueness of the topic. Then if we talk about the rhyme scheme of the poem, it is A, B, C, B. All the stanzas are like that. Every stanza is having 4 lines in it, and the first line does not match with the second line, the second line doesn't match with the third line, but the second and the fourth line end voices match. So that is why this type of rhyme scheme is there. We have total 5 stanzas which describe the details of the death or the being buried there or the transportation. All these 5 stanzas have the 4 lines, and every stanza has the similar rhyme scheme. Now, there are some of the images also used, that is that of the mourners. The images has been used, then it's the drum beating. The image there, then it's the box and the boots of the lead, and the bell toll and toll of the bell, and after that ultimately the finished product, the plank has been used that broke and the body fell. So in this way, there is kind of images used. Some of them can be interpreted on the symbolic basis as well. But the poem is quite clear. Every image and symbol is relevant to death, relevant to the passage of one from one word to the other, relevant of the ceremonies which we do at the time of somebody dies, and relevant to the things which happen at that time. But the beautiful thing is that the dead person is herself able to witness and see all these things. Now, the poem can also be interpreted on many other levels, that how we see ourselves when we are dying, when the thing is finishing, and how the clergy mentions all that. The fears which are normally there, these are not mentioned here, but it is actually a type of fascination of the new experience. In this regard, this poet resembles more with Donne and Browning, who also welcomed death, and same is the case here. And then she is totally describing all these things without feeling the fear of all that. So the poem doesn't raise the fear, rather it creates a kind of fascination and mystery for us. So that's the type of poem and the poetess has written. The wording and the language is quite simple. There's a kind of musicality created by her, by the repetition of the sounds and by the repetition of the words. Also, that soul word is repeated again and again. Then it has the boots, and after that the bell and the ear connected together to create an image, and the solitary and silence and the race. So that's why there's a lot of alliteration and kind of repetition of the words also, which creates a specific impact in order to make us realize that is the quality of the all modern poems produced in English, that the language is simple in American English, and they try to convey the idea by emphasis, by some sort of punctuations as well. The same has been used by the writer or the poet of this poem. So Emily Dickinson has proved her greatness by writing this type of poem and conveying us this mysterious idea. What happens to her when she's dead, and how does her mind visualize all that? So that's it from me for this day. Hope to see you in some other video. If you like it and understand the poem, do not fail to hit the subscribe and the like button. And if your comments are there, sometime I post the things there on YouTube for as replies, or sometime through email. Do not fail to comment if you'd like to have and ask a question as well. So thank you. That's it from me.